Hey gamers! Today we're diving into the quirky and useless facts behind some of the most iconic gaming controllers ever made. Get ready for a fun ride through gaming history. We'll uncover the hidden stories, the design flaws, and the bizarre inspirations behind the buttons, joysticks, and D-pads that shaped our gaming experiences. From the Atari to the PlayStation 5, we're leaving no controller unturned. So buckle up, grab your favorite controller, and let's get this show on the road. Alright, let's kick things off with the Atari 2600, a console that practically invented home gaming as we know it. Now get this, that iconic joystick you wrestled with? It wasn't originally designed for your hands. Early prototypes were actually intended to be foot pedals. Can you imagine trying to navigate Pac-Man with your feet? Talk about a recipe for some serious gamer rage. Thankfully, they came to their senses and gave us the handheld joystick we know and love, even if it did mean sacrificing those sweet foot gaming skills. Next up, we're warping forward to the 8-bit era with the Nintendo Entertainment System, or NES for us cool kids. The NES controller, with its iconic rectangular shape and simple button layout, is practically gaming royalty. But here's the thing. Its design wasn't exactly born from pure gaming genius. Believe it or not, the NES controller's shape was heavily inspired by the humble TV remote control. I guess Nintendo wanted to make sure even your grandma felt comfortable picking up a controller. Now let's talk Sega Genesis. The Genesis controller, with its sleek black design and 3-button layout, was all about bringing the arcade experience home. But did you know that 3-button layout wasn't just about replicating the arcade feel? It was also a strategic move by Sega to differentiate themselves from Nintendo. You see, back then, more buttons meant more power, or at least that's what Sega wanted you to believe. And you know what? It worked. Chapter 4. SNES. Shoulder buttons from the racetrack. Get ready to press some shoulders because we're talking about the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. The SNES controller, with its rounded edges and, most importantly, the introduction of those iconic shoulder buttons, was a game changer. But those shoulder buttons weren't just a random design choice. They were actually inspired by the paddle shifters found on race car steering wheels. I guess Nintendo wanted to give players that feeling of high-octane control, even if they were just racing Koopas. Next up, we're entering the world of PlayStation with the original PlayStation controller. This iconic design, with its grips and face buttons, revolutionized gaming. But here's the thing about that unique shape. It was partially inspired by a boomerang. That's right, the same weapon used by indigenous Australians for hunting. Who knew that ancient weaponry would inspire the future of gaming? Chapter 6. N64. 3-pronged. For reasons? Now, let's journey into the world of 3D gaming with the Nintendo 64. The N64 controller, a true icon of weirdness. That 3-pronged design was unlike anything we had ever seen before. But why 3 handles? Was Nintendo trying to reinvent the wheel, or were they just messing with us? Well, the official word is that the 3 handles were meant to accommodate different hand positions for various game genres. Sega Dreamcast, a controller ahead of its time. Now, let's talk about the Sega Dreamcast, a console that was ahead of its time in so many ways. I mean, it had online gaming built in. And the controller? Well, it had a built-in screen called the VMU, or Visual Memory Unit. This little screen could display game stats, mini-games, and even act as a portable Tamagotchi. It was like having a mini console within your controller. PlayStation 2. Analog precision. On to the PlayStation 2, a console that dominated the 6th generation of gaming. The PS2 controller refined the PlayStation formula, with those dual analog sticks becoming a staple of modern gaming. But did you know those analog sticks weren't just for moving your character around? Sony designed them to mimic the feel of a car's steering wheel, adding a whole new level of precision to racing games. Game Boy. From cross to D-pad, Let's take a trip back to the days of portable gaming with the original Game Boy. The Game Boy's D-pad, that iconic plus-shaped button layout, has become synonymous with portable gaming. But it wasn't a completely original idea. The D-pad was actually inspired by the cross-shaped control pad found on Nintendo's earlier handheld, the Game & Watch. Chapter 10. Game Boy Advance, Shouldering the Burden of History. Next up is the Game Boy Advance, a handheld that brought color and more powerful hardware to portable gaming. It also brought back those shoulder buttons we first saw on the SNES. But they weren't just there for decoration. The GBA's shoulder buttons were added to make it easier to play ports of SNES games. After all, you can't have Super Mario World without those L and R buttons. Chapter 11. Xbox, the Duke that nobody liked. Let's move on to the mighty Xbox, Microsoft's first foray into the console wars. Now, the original Xbox controller, affectionately nicknamed the Duke, is infamous for its robust size. It was so large that it was actually redesigned for smaller hands, leading to the much more manageable Controller S. Chapter 12. GameCube, the quirky cube. Now let's talk about the GameCube, Nintendo's little purple lunchbox of a console. The GameCube controller, with its unusual button layout and colorful array, was certainly unique. But it wasn't just designed to stand out. That button layout was actually carefully crafted to be intuitive for new players, with the large A button taking center stage. On to the Xbox 360, the console that brought online gaming to the masses. The Xbox 360 controller refined the Xbox design, but it also added a new button, the guide button. You know that glowing orb in the center? That wasn't just a cool design element, it was inspired by the power button found on TV remotes, making it easy to turn on the console and jump into a game. Now let's talk about the PlayStation 3, with its powerful hardware and Blu-ray capabilities. The PS3 controller, initially called the 6-axis, tried something new: motion controls. But Sony's inspiration for this wasn't exactly original. The 6-axis motion sensing was heavily influenced by the runaway success of the Nintendo Wii's motion controls. Time to talk about the Nintendo DS, the dual-screened handheld that took the world by storm. But the DS's two screens weren't just a gimmick. They were actually inspired by Nintendo's own history, specifically the dual-screen design of the classic Game & Watch handhelds. Nintendo has always been a master of taking old ideas and giving them a fresh coat of paint. Now, let's talk about the Nintendo Wii, the console that brought motion controls to the masses. The Wii Remote, with its unconventional design, was designed to look and feel like a TV remote control. Why? Because Nintendo wanted to make the Wii accessible to everyone, even those who had never picked up a controller before. On to the PlayStation 4, a console that focused on powerful hardware and social features. The PS4 controller refined the DualShock design, but it also added a new feature, a touchpad. This wasn't just a random addition, though. The PS4 controller's touchpad was inspired by the increasing popularity of touchscreens on smartphones. Now let's talk about the Nintendo 3DS, the handheld that brought glasses-free 3D gaming to the palm of our hands. The 3DS's 3D screen wasn't just a technological marvel, it was a sign of the times. You see, the 3DS was released during a time when 3D movies were experiencing a resurgence in popularity. Moving on to the Xbox One, Microsoft's answer to the PS4. The Xbox One controller refined the Xbox 360 design, but it also added a new feature: impulse triggers. These weren't your ordinary rumble motors. Impulse triggers were designed to provide precise haptic feedback, allowing you to feel the revving of an engine or the impact of a gunshot. Next up, we have the Nintendo Switch, the hybrid console that lets you game at home or on the go. The Switch's Joy-Con controllers, with their detachable design, were unlike anything we had seen before. They could be used wirelessly, attached to the console, or even slotted into a grip to form a more traditional controller. Let's talk about the Xbox Series X, Microsoft's latest foray into the console market. The Xbox Series X controller builds upon the Xbox One design, but it also adds a dedicated share button. This button makes it easier than ever to capture screenshots and gameplay clips, and share them with the world. Finally, we arrive at the PlayStation 5, Sony's latest and greatest console. The PS5 controller, the DualSense, features haptic feedback and adaptive triggers that can adjust their resistance based on in-game actions. These adaptive triggers are designed to create a more immersive gaming experience, allowing you to feel the tension of drawing a bow or the resistance of pulling a trigger. Thanks for joining us on this quirky journey through gaming history. We've journeyed through time, uncovering the weird, wacky, and often head-scratching design choices behind some of gaming's most iconic controllers. From foot-controlled Atari to the adaptive triggers of the PS5, we've seen how controllers have evolved alongside gaming itself. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more fun and informative videos. Game on!